Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending. Welcome to the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. Can I make sure, I'll go through the fire and emergency evacuation. There's no drills planned for this afternoon. In event of a fire or other emergency, please vacate the building in an orderly manner through the nearest available exit. Make your way to the fire assembly point in the car park. Can I please ask that the live stream is started and verbal confirmation provided that we're broadcasting?
I confirm, Chair, that we are now live streaming.
Thank you. So welcome to this meeting of Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. The agenda papers and other relevant information for the meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming the meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meeting, providing that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If anybody doesn't wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. I don't see anybody raising their hand. To ensure the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. I don't think we have anybody joining us remotely today. Is that correct? Nobody joining us. Any members who did join would not have voting rights, but that's not applicable. So we have a number of officers and other attendees present, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves as we come to the specific items on the agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we do. We have apologies from Councillor David Davies, Sylvia Cockcroft from the Archdiocese of Cardiff, and Sam Prattley of the Diocese of Hereford.
Thank you. Have we received any details of members nominated to attend the meeting in place of a member of the committee?
No, none received.
Okay. Do members of the committee have any declarations of interest in respect of any items on the agenda? No? Right. We move to the minutes to approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of July 2024. Are there any proposed corrections for accuracy? Yes. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. So on the, forgive me, I'm just trying to find the page number, page 21, at resolved that point number 2 identifies that the funding available to support development of a child-friendly Herefordshire is distributed as rapidly as possible. There's no funding aligned to the development of child-friendly. So I'm just wondering if that sort of morphed from the conversation above, which reflects on the funding allocated for what are in effect targeted early help interventions through the Police and Crime Commissioner and the council money. So the bullet point 2 is it's inaccurate, but is also not necessary.
Thank you. As far as I recall, that was part of the discussion. So if everybody is in agreement that... I don't recall us having a discussion about funding specifically, a funding work stream for child-friendly. No, I don't think that we did. I think what Councillor Powell is referring to is correct, actually, because as far as I recall, there wasn't a conversation about funding for child-friendly Herefordshire. It was about the current funding programmes that are in operation. So if we actually just remove that bullet point, that would make that item accurate. So if we can make a note of that. Is everybody in agreement with that, the recollection? Thank you. Any other points relating to the minutes? Okay. Can we then agree to approve the minutes held on 30th of July as the correct record, and I'll sign the minutes after the meeting, if that's okay. Everybody agreed? Yeah? Thank you. Right. Have we received any questions from members of the public?
3 questions from members of the public were accepted. The questions and responses have been published as a supplement to the agenda for this meeting on the Herefordshire Council website.
Thank you. Are there any supplementary questions from the public?
We've received 2 supplementary questions, which I will read out now.
Can I just confirm that a questioner can ask one supplementary question, and a supplementary question must be a question, not a statement, and arise directly out of the original question or the reply, and not take longer than a minute to ask. Please make sure that they don't disclose any confidential or exempt information, names of individuals, or provide information where they may be easily identifiable. For example, individual officers of public bodies, making criminal accusations or referring to an issue which is currently the subject of formal council complaint. Nobody's actually asking the question in person, so I'll ask Simon to read them out. Thank you. Advice then as to what we do about that. I haven't actually seen the supplementary questions. Has anybody gone through them to make sure that they don't, because Councillor Powell is sort of identifying a concern about that. Apparently they were approved by the monitoring officer, Councillor Powell. Okay. Do you have...
I only had chance to view them literally at the end of another meeting before I walked in here. I have concern that there is a strong chance an individual could be identified, but I, except if advice has been given, then we should follow that advice.
Chair, I think it should be minuted.
Right. If we can minute the concern, and if the questions have been through the monitoring officer, then I think...
Yes, let's do that, Chair.
Sorry, defer the item and then what, bring it back within this meeting?
Yes.
All right, if we can just defer that and we can get clarity from the monitoring officer, so we'll come back to that. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Powell, for raising that. Do we have any questions from members of the council?
None received.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on to the agenda item 7, which is quality assurance. So the brief was for the to brief the committee on the quality assurance framework for Herefordshire Children's Services, including values and principles underpinning this. Also to describe the means by which quality assurance activity is undertaken and the outcomes for quality assurance activity in the last year and the impact of quality assurance activity in the Herefordshire Council Herefordshire Children's Service improvement journey. So thank you very much to officers who have worked with us on this item. I think if you could please introduce yourselves, that would be helpful. And then if you can sort of run us through the discussion, and I mean obviously we've had the papers, so we don't need to sort of go through them verbatim, but then we can open the matter up to discussion. Thank you. Who's going to lead on this?
So I'm Dylan Harrison, Head of Service for Safeguarding and Quality Assurance here at Herefordshire Children's Services.
I'm Honey Woodward, Service Manager for Quality Assurance with Children's Services.
Thank you. Dylan, would you like to sort of just take us through the framework, sort of explain the, a whistle-stop
Sure,
sort
yes,
of
of course.
tour of what you've provided us.
Thank you. Well, you've had my report, and I also believe you've had a supplementary report covering some activity in the first 3 months of this year. So the quality assurance framework is a fundamental aspect of the work we're doing here as part of Herefordshire Children's Services Improvement Journey. We're self-evaluating our progress against key performance indicators and our performance, and also the service we give to vulnerable children and families here in the county. And as explained in the document, we do that in a three-pronged way. So quality assurance activity covers key performance indicators, so the kind of must-dos we have to do, the timescales, the reports on time, meetings held on time, abidance by statutory and guidance and so on. Our feedback that we collect from children, young people and their families, which we're doing increasingly now and is fundamental and central to our improvement plan activity. Understanding what they're telling us about the service they're receiving and also the impact of that service, and then using that feedback to improve our services. And also central to our quality assurance is our auditing activity, both our monthly internal case auditing activity, which is done alongside practitioners, social workers, by team managers and by other managers in the department, and also involves families giving their views and also children giving their views about particular aspects of the work that we do. And as I explained in the paper, there's 6 domains by which we evaluate our audits, which includes the quality of assessment, the quality of plans, the quality of supervision of workers, the quality of management oversight, diversity, and most importantly, I would argue, the voice of the child. So that's a key part of that. Those are the 3 key prongs of our quality assurance framework. That is being updated at the moment and be completed by the end of September. And we use that in conjunction with our improvement plan activity, hand in hand, to drive up the quality of work that we do and also to ensure the impact is there. The other part of quality assurance is the multi-agency work we do. And we do that in partnership with our health, police and voluntary sector partners through the auspices of the Safeguarding Partnership. And in fact, I was doing one of those this morning on the use of Mental Health Act powers around with children. And that's also really important in terms of improving relationships with partners, improving services across all the services, not just children's social care, its impact on families, also to improve our procedures and to improve the effectiveness of the work that we do in general. So you can see from the report that last year we did last financial year, that is, we did 307 audits. We do a lot of auditing, and what that means is that we do understand our practice strengths and weaknesses very, very well. We have a moderation process which checks effectively the quality of audits, and we find that quality of audits is very consistent, and the grading we apply, which is alongside the Ofsted grades, and uses the Ofsted grade indicators to guide our work, is consistent. We are seeing improvement in the quality of grades. We're seeing that there is work still to do. Naturally, we are obviously where we are as an authority, but we are seeing particular strength in certain areas, such as the accounting for diversity and also supervision and management oversight. We recognise there's still a certain amount of work to do in terms of some of the other domains, assessments, plans, and so on. But progress is being made. I think the new quality assurance framework, which we're preparing and operating actually from this month, will drive improvements still further. I think the key to that is the greater emphasis on the voice of the family and also children and young people. So that's, I think, a brief synopsis, Chair.
Thank you. I think it would be helpful if you could just sort of list what the changes are in the new framework,
Okay.
and why those have come about. So what we've learned and how what we've learned is actually driving improvement would be helpful. Thanks.
So the new framework, as I say, places a much greater emphasis on feedback from children, young people and families. That was present in the older framework and in the auditing, case auditing process we had, but there's a whole new stream of activity to collect feedback on a regular basis at given junctures from families and from children and young people. And we've started to do that, and we'll be monitoring that month on month. In terms of the case audit work, we've changed our audit template somewhat to make it a little bit more user friendly for practitioners. But I think more importantly, we've changed the method by which we're doing the audits. So what we tended to do for the last 18 months was focus on specific areas of the service where we either had a concern or we wanted to have a closer look at a particular area of the service. And what that meant was the audit activity moved around the service month on month. That gave us, I suppose, some difficulty in monitoring progress because we were looking at, children care 1 month, child protection another month, so on and so forth. From now on, we're looking at the whole service every month, and the main audit is being done by the team manager on a case within their own team, involving the social worker and the family and the child. That is then, alongside that, there's a peer auditor who is not part of the operational work, who also does an audit of the case, and then they come together to agree on the grading. So that will give us month on month.
Just to be clear, they don't come together to agree the grading. They each do an independent grading of each other. So the team manager responsible for the casework will audit the case and those 7 domains within it and reach a grading on each of those domains and an overall grading for the case. The peer auditor also does that, and the peer auditor also speaks to the child or the parents that are involved in the case. Then the outcomes of those 2 audits are looked at together, and where they differ, we have a third senior manager that comes in to discuss why have you graded that as that and why have you graded that as that, and let's look at that. And that's where the grade descriptors come in, so that making sure that we've got consistency around what we're applying. And there's immediate learning then for both those auditors in terms of, am I being very optimistic or very generous in my grades, or am I being, overcritical in terms of where I'm grading? So that's called a looped audit. So it gives immediate learning to the auditors, as well as obviously the feedback in terms of individual cases. And as Dylan said, applying that then across the whole service gives us a much better opportunity to do the analysis of within each of those 7 grades that Dylan outlined. What are we doing well? Is it voice of the child, and is voice of the child doing well across the service, or is voice of the child being heard and well in one particular area of the service? And we've got much more detailed analysis right down to who are the individual workers, the individual teams and the service areas, so that we can start to build a pattern on, are we getting a repeat that stuck at requires improvement a lot, or repeat inadequates from the same person, the same team or the same area, or are we getting good and improvements from good to outstanding, and we're seeing the impact of that feedback better in some areas than others, so that we can really understand the cause. And I think one of the things that we've not been as good at as we need to be is when we feed back to our workforce what's going well and what's not going well, it has been at quite a high level. And so for those workers, it's not meaningful enough. Everybody feels that they're working really hard and doing a really good job unless they're told otherwise. And so if you're told overall as a service, we've still got 50% that requires improvement, and we've gone a few more that are good this month, you're going to sit there as an individual and say, well, I must be in the good category. We need that real detailed feedback so that people understand what's not going well and who by, and equally that those that are doing well are rewarded directly as individuals and in service areas and in teams for how well that they are doing and in that impact of improvements being seen. So that's what that looped audit gives to us. And so as part of that audit of case files, as I've said, the peer auditor will talk to the parent and the child and young person, and the auditor of the case will also engage the social worker's views in terms of where they're feeling and what's happened and why they've done X, Y, Z in a case. But that in itself is one element of talking to children and young people and parents as a service user feedback. As Dylan described at the beginning, there is a whole work stream on voice of the child feedback from children and young people about how they are experiencing our interventions into their lives. So it's not about individual cases that I'm a social worker and I'm working with this child and I bring them into meetings and talk to them about the assessment and talk to them about the care plan. That's just how we work with children and young people. This is about going to those children, young people and their parents and asking them, how have you experienced our services? Were you able to contact your social worker easily? Did you get a copy of the plan? Do you know why your child's in care? You're a child in care. Do you know why you're in care? Do you feel like it's been explained to you? That's service experience feedback, and that's different to the case-by-case work we do with children, and it's different to participation, where we bring along children, young people who are in care to engage them in activities, just to talk to them about what it's like being in care of Herefordshire. So making a very clear, distinct difference between those three things and having a whole programme of how are we going to children and young people and giving them the opportunity to say, actually this has made a really good difference to my life, or it's made no difference at all, and no, I couldn't speak to my social worker, I couldn't get hold of them, and I don't know why I'm in care, or absolutely I was able to talk to my social worker, I do feel like I've been listened to, I did get a copy of my plan, and I do know why I'm on a child protection plan, for example. So that's what the new refocus, I think, of our quality assurance framework brings in. We've already gone through that and launched it across our workforce. We've done it at staff meetings and also through individual team meetings. As Dylan said, the actual framework, we just need to update that now so that it reflects the work that we've done through the improvement plan and that we've already done with our workforce. So it's a document that we just need to update to complete that. And Dylan's working on getting that updated by the end of September.
Thank you. And thank you, Director, for being very clear about that as well. And obviously that is a major part of the improvement plan, which we'll come to later. I just wanted to try and break this topic down. First of all, just look at the actual framework itself. And I was wondering, Honey Woodward, if you, because you've been involved in, as far as I understand, you've been involved in developing that new framework. Is that, am I right in thinking that?
I'm working with Dylan, looking at refreshing the new framework. Yes.
Okay, so can I ask, and I will extend this out to questions, but we did have a session with Leeds about the quality assurance and their framework, and one of the key things that they said to us was about doing the simple things well, and I noticed that on the actual framework that's publicly available, they make quite a big point of that. And I just wondered, what is the importance of that to the way that the whole system operates from then on? If we, Honey, would you like to come in, and maybe Dylan, if you wouldn't mind turning your microphone off, just because it affects the camera, and then you can pass on.
Well, we're working very closely with Leeds as our improvement partners, and they're supporting us in developing our framework. Um, I'm not sure, I can't answer that exactly in terms of the simple things. We're doing a lot of work in a lot of different areas. I think, it's very important that we don't have a scattergun approach and try and do everything all at once. But I think we're very clear about the direction that we want to go and what we're doing in order to get there, and how we're achieving that, and doing it well before we move on to the next, the next area of focus.
So one of the, sorry, Dylan, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, I think for me, doing the simple things well is really about the experience of children and families and young people in terms of the processes we do. And I think that's really what the feedback element gives us. It gives us real-time feedback on what the experience is and what impact it's having. So simple things well would be, did my social worker arrive on time? Did my social worker give me a copy of my assessment or my plan? Did they explain what the plan was about? Was I involved in the formulation of the plan? Those fundamentals of social work practice, and that's what we're testing through the feedback mechanism.
Thank you. And yes, Tina, as the director, have you got a view on this?
It's not just a view, it's just to explain. The quality assurance framework that we've got is not wrong. Nothing that's said in it is wrong. We are just simply updating it to reflect the new programme of activity, to make sure that the framework that we are being clear on, which is stripping it back to a performance framework, is not just about audit. It is about KPIs, it is about audit, and it is about service user feedback. And only with all three of those things in place do you get a real understanding of the quality of your services, the timeliness, the demand, the quality, and the experience of the child and the person at the end. The current framework doesn't say anything wrong, it just doesn't focus sufficiently on explaining those three things, and we could explain that better. And then the process that we've described, that we have developed with regards to the two auditors and this peer auditor's role and my auditor's role, that has changed. So the framework just needs updating to reflect that. So it's not that this framework is wrong or that we're rewriting it or we're starting again. It's just that we need to update it to reflect where we've now reached to as a position in terms of those three key areas and that new way of working.
Thanks. I will open that up. I can see Councillor Proctor has a question. Just one of the questions that I have is about the values and principles that kind of underpin that framework. And when I had a look at the framework that you sent us, it seemed very much that the values and principles were the council's corporate values and principles. And I wondered whether actually there is a more specific set of values and principles for children's services that actually underpin that framework.
Yeah, I mean the current framework, which is about to be superseded, is being replaced, and the updated Thrive values are within that, alongside the values which are articulated in the workforce development strategy, which I'm sure most of you have seen. So those are that we do, we children get the help at the right time, that we're working with children, young people and families, and they're at the heart of everything we do. We work together with families, so it's reflecting our restorative and strength-based approach, basically. And those are articulated within the new quality assurance framework. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Because one of the recommendations that I was thinking is just to make sure that that framework is actually publicly available and that those values and principles are actually evident within that, so that it's very transparent exactly what those values are. So, Councillor Proctor, you've got a question.
So I think this is possibly a slightly chicken and egg thing. So if we were an outstanding service, I imagine we would be able to point to across our quality framework where it reflects the things that children and young people have told us are important. And at the moment, we already know that we've not been so good at collecting the views of children and young people. So how will we manage that? We've got to have a quality framework. We're presumably doing the thing that we think is most relevant, but how will we manage kind of updating that based on as we learn more about what our children and young people think are important?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, I have to say. We have not been good at collecting feedback from children and young people in a coherent or consistent way. So we've got a lot of pockets of practice across the department, but the new quality assurance framework clearly sets in train a process, much more robust process for collecting feedback on a consistent way at given points. What I would say, however, is that as part of the improvement plan activity, the new improvement plan activity, we have been able to talk, I've been able to talk personally to groups of care leavers about what they think is important, and that is now embedded within the improvement plan and will be embedded also within the quality assurance framework. So we have a benchmark of feedback. As we go forward, clearly that will mature, and I think that will mature quite quickly given the new framework.
So we won't change the framework. The framework is the framework for how we implement those three things. What we have got as the foundation around the framework is a KPI dashboard that is underpinning the improvement plan. We've got the case file audit model, which I've just described to you, and we are now developing those range of opportunities to talk to our children and young people to answer the questions that we have specifically put in as measures within the Phase 2 improvement plan. As part of that plan, though, each of the service areas is also developing their own mini quality assurance framework, again based on those three domains. So that mini service area will be driven from what the overarching umbrella framework outcomes is telling us. So for KPIs, if the KPIs are telling us that we have got assessments that are not completed in time scale, but we can see that that's particularly a concern for us over that quarter, then those service areas will be able to look at their KPIs and say, is it my service area that's got assessments overdue or assessments out of timescales? And if it is, for that next quarter period, I will do some work on how we improve the timeliness. If the audit activity is telling us that it is about the quality of the plan, similarly, for those next 3 months, I might, as the team manager and the service manager for that service area, say, okay, over this next quarter, we're going to do some targeted activity around how can we improve the quality of our plans, and the same for service user feedback. So if the children and young people are saying, for example, we are hearing the feedback that says, I never get a copy of my assessment, that's the feedback that I don't get, or my social worker isn't available when I ring, then they will take that on in that service area. So it's almost like, and so those activities are driven by what the overarching outcomes of the KPIs, the audit activity, and the service user feedback is telling us. And that's how we will make sure that we are drilling down and then rising back up, because actually activity there should then impact on the overarching framework that we've got that kind of underpins the plan. So it's a dynamic process, but it's not one that every 3 months we are reinventing the wheel. It is, what are we doing around the KPIs, the audit activity, what it's telling us, and what children and young people are telling us. Does that make sense?
Can I ask, when you talk about the quality of the plan, are you talking about individual children's plans? So I think what I'm hearing is that the feedback from the children and young people is absolutely crucial to the quality of the plan. And from what I've read, that has been a bit of a weakness, previously. It's been identified as a weakness, so that you're saying now there is a concentrated approach to make sure that the plans are more robust and that they reflect the children's needs.
Yes. So there'll be a range of things. So we know as professionals what we expect to see that makes a good quality plan. And the grade descriptors draw that out. What does an outstanding plan look like, a good plan? And we get that from a range of documents, from the Ofsted gradings, from not our own, but from general, what does good look like? Ofsted briefings, Ofsted information, research, all of those things. So our gradings that the auditors can look at will take that into account. And that's what the document that we've done to guide the auditors. This is what a good plan looks like. This is what a requires improvement plan looks like. This is what an inadequate plan would look like. These are the things that you'll find that are missing. In addition, we will ask children and young people, not the professional question, do you think that this looks like a good plan? We will ask them appropriate questions. Did you understand your plan when you got a copy of it? Did you know what people were meant to be doing? What the purpose of the plan was trying to achieve for you? Did you get a copy of the plan? So we'll ask the relevant questions to the children and young people about the quality of their plan as they experienced it. And that, along with the gradings, along with the timeliness, did the children get a plan that's dated within 6 months? Did they have a review to review that plan within 6 months? That's how we triangulate the overall quality of a plan. So we might have one element that says the audit activity, for example, might say, actually, the quality of our plans has gone really well, really well. We've been feeding back. This is what we expect in a plan. This is what it should look like. Written really well, child-centred language, great. But we might find from our KPIs that it's taking way too long to get those plans out to children. We might find from children that when they get it, it's great, but they don't often enough receive their plan. So we will always triangulate, which is why a quality assurance framework has to have those three elements, works so well. What we're doing here in Herefordshire is we are just now embedding that kind of approach to quality assurance. So as I say, the quality assurance framework is not wrong, but we need it to be reflecting all of those three elements, and we need it to be understood and embedded in our practice, and that's what we've started to do. Over this last 3 months, we've launched it, as Dylan says, now. So we've already got that activity. We've started that activity with service user feedback. That started in August. We've had the first month, and we've looked at what did families tell us about the quality and the impact of work with them. We have done our briefing sessions with staff around the audit process. We've updated the grade. So we've been doing all of that work so that we're ready to launch that whole framework. We've been developing the improvement board dashboard. All of those things have been done, and we've had an analysis at the end of Q1 of the audit activity, the KPI activity, and the service user feedback activity. And all of that will then drive us forward into what we're doing in Q2 and Q3 and Q4.
So how will we know that what we're doing is having an impact on young people? Let's say after 6 months, what would we expect to see as a consequence of these revisions?
You will see it in all of them. You will see that young people tell us they understand why they've got a plan. Yes, they've received a copy of their plan. Having a social worker or a social care worker in their lives, parents will tell us, made a difference. They will say they understood the plan and that they contributed to the plan. Our KPIs will show that we are getting plans out in timescales, that we've got less plans overdue. Our audits will tell us that those plans, when we professionally audit them, are at a higher grade.
Okay, thank you. So it is about working with and not to young people. I can see that Councillor Highfield has a question. One of the questions I just quickly wanted to ask is that we know that there are workforce issues, and we know that the change of social workers is a problem for many young people. So that's quite a challenge for this process and the kind of improved quality of plans. How do we sort of join that difficulty with workforce issues up and to sort of meet the challenge that you've set out in improving the quality of plans?
So the workforce strategy has been completed. We have a workforce board now, so the group that was developing the strategy has moved into a workforce board. Workforce is priority within the priority plan, and it's priority within the council plan. So recruitment, retention, all of those things are just part of our business of how do we convert agency to permanent, keep the agency staff that we do need long term, to stop the turnover, because it's not just agency for children and young people. Actually, they don't mind whether they've got a permanent worker or an agency worker, as long as they're good and they're stable. So we have to acknowledge that we need agency workers. So our plan of action isn't about just converting agency to permanent. It's about stabilising our workforce. The more stable your workforce is, the more when we implement this kind of new way of working, the less we have to keep going back to the drawing board to keep telling the new workers, this is what we do and this is the way that we do it. We're really, we've made a lot of improvement in terms of our management permanency. I think that's gone from 69% at the end of last year up to 83%. I'd like to say 84%. That's a great starting point, because it's through the managers and that you're implementing that service one, understanding of the new framework. So that's a really good positive improvement for us. So that work around the workforce, the other example that I've just given you, making sure that our workforce are both recognised for when they, as individuals and of teams, have made progress and done really well is really, really important. Not just feeding back overall as a service, we've done this and this and this, but actually the detailed feedback to them. And we're doing that within the analysis work, the KPI work, and the service user feedback work. So all of the workforce things are just weaved in throughout the work that we're doing all the time, as well as having that distinct workforce board to implement the workforce strategy.
Thank you. I think, again, continuity is absolutely key to all of that. Dylan, did you want to make a comment on that?
Just very quickly. I mean, I think the other, as well as being head of service QA, I'm also the principal social worker. So what that means effectively is that although I'm responsible, I have overall responsibility for the auditing activity and so on, I'm also a member, vice chair actually, of the Workforce Board. I'm also responsible for the Social Care Academy, which has been really successful actually in training and retaining newly qualified social workers and apprentices. And when gives us something really concrete to build upon. And I'm also have responsibility for the learning development offer for our staff. And Honey's team also, we want to respond quickly to audit findings. So the managers will deal with it in team meetings. We talk about audit activity in our staff conferences. As principal social worker, I will talk about it in the staff forums, principal social worker forums, but also Honey's team, QA team, are running both team and individual workshops on the key priorities, such as plans and assessments.
Thank you. Councillor Highfield, you had a question, and then Councillor Proctor.
Thank you very much. This is very interesting. I'm Councillor Robert Highfield, and a member of this committee. I'm going to ask a provocative question, so I beg your forgiveness in advance. What it sounds like is that there's a constant and regular review of the work performance of the social workers, a report card that is marked apparently by the families, who have, we must admit, some of them, some bias, some vested interest in painting a picture that blames somebody else for their own problems. And I haven't heard anything about the voice of the social workers coming in to balance that, to give a viewpoint from their work experience and the valuable insights they can give into ways of improving things. So indeed, it sounds to me a little bit of an oppressive workplace, to have this constant pressure of review and quality assurance and marking and questioning, and did you do this in time, and did you get that right? That sounds quite oppressive to me. And as I said, I don't hear the voice of the workers coming back in this, although I'm sure there is a system for that. So perhaps you could comment on that.
Yeah, not oppressive at all, and that's not how we work. So, firstly, I would say we have the council workforce survey. We've just had the results of that, and we've had that broken down into the Children's Directorate. So I'm able to now have a real deep dive look at what the workforce across children's is telling us. And there is actually a much greater submission this year of children's and some good positive feedback. We have also just launched yesterday our social work health check. So this is a national approach to understanding how social workers feel they are supported, challenged and guided to be the best practitioners that they can be. We've just launched that health check across our social workers. And what we know is that, you know, as part of our workforce strategy is that we'll look at the councils, we'll look at our social work health check, and then we'll look at whether or not we need to do an additional survey for all staff to feed into. We've just launched a communications overview in terms of reinforcing to staff how they can get information and how they can feed in and back about what's happening in all of the developments, as well as just engaging them day to day, month to month in different things. And we've just, I just yesterday did my second staff conference. So we now have bi-monthly staff conferences that I lead, where I meet all of the staff. One's virtual, one's in person, and we've got those booked throughout the year. Obviously, the overarching outcome, we did our locality redesign, informal approach. I met with all of the team managers, all of the managers from team manager up, myself, talked to them about what we were going to do in terms of what the proposal was. They then have had the opportunity to feed back that down to their teams, to all of their frontline workers, so that they can feed back on what that initial proposal looks like for the development of locality working. I've had all of that feedback now, some really, really great comprehensive documents. I talked to them about it at the staff meeting yesterday, so really engaged them in being able to feed back. We're now going to take that into account and have a look at that, and then go back before we go to formal consultation. So actually, I think very inclusive. What staff want is progress. They want to feel that they are both supported, and they absolutely want to feel challenged, to be good practitioners as well. And I think that you know, we've got all of those different trains in progress for our staff. And as I talked about, you know, these processes are about, you know, we have a monthly shout out for recognition that people have made about their peers and their colleagues that they're working with. They're all shared, printed, and they go out loud. As part of our complaints review, you heard me talk about last time, the importance of making sure that we get our compliments. You know, the compliment section from external people was a missing part of the report that came to Scrutiny on complaints. It was just about complaints. So as part of our review, we've made sure that those quarterly complaints report absolutely capture all of the external compliments that we get from partners, from courts, from all of the people doing that are recognising, as you say, the work that social workers doing, that social workers and social care workers that we're doing across the workforce.
Do you have a system where feedback can be anonymous?
There is the whistleblowing, which is obviously corporate for all local authorities, so people can feedback anonymously. You can send anonymous emails. If you're more technical than me, you can anyway. So yes, people can send anonymous emails. I've received anonymous emails, not here, but I've received them before in terms of from staff that want to share concerns. But actually, I'd really want to promote an organisation where people don't feel that they have to be anonymous, that they can feel confident that they can raise their concerns and challenges that they have in practice, and not feel concerned about doing that, and are able to do that with their own manager or their senior managers. And I've certainly got examples where people have done that over this last 3 months, even here in Herefordshire. So I do think people do feel that they can raise concerns and will be listened to.
Well,
And that's
forgive
part
my
of the question-
cynicism.
That's part of the questions that we ask in the survey. Do you feel that you can raise concerns? Do you feel like your managers listen to you? Can you raise your concerns with them? And the surveys are anonymous.
Okay.
Can I just
Because,
ask?
can I just follow
sorry.
up on that? Forgive my cynicism. I've looked after large numbers of staff for many, many years. And it's my experience that you never get the complete story when a boss asks a junior staff what their thoughts are on something. You only get some proportion of the truth. And you only get the actual real story if you can find somewhere. I don't like anonymous emails. I don't like that as a way of getting things back. Staff surveys, they can be of value, but there are management methods of getting feedback which avoids this problem of pressure, this not intentional pressure, but unintentional pressure from managers. And it's my experience, you almost never get the full story when you have a boss asking a group, oh, what do you reckon? Is this good or not? Doesn't work.
I would agree, and that's why I've just described a number of ways that we offer the opportunities for staff to feedback. The anonymous surveys, open door, come in person, send an email, whatever you want to do. If you've got experience and you think that there's something else that we could do, let me know.
Yeah, quality circles. They work. They ensure that the feedback is valid because it's from a group, but no individual is named. And they are from people of a same level, same rank, if you like, within the organisation. There's no bosses present when the circles discuss issues, and the feedback from that is, in my experience, probably about the best way you can get. Basically, it's not wholly anonymous. You know that a particular group of workers, say 6 or 8 of them, have said this is something you should consider, but you don't get the name of who's saying it. Nobody's put in the spotlight. You just know that that group think that that would be something worth taking, and I would strongly recommend that you adopt quality circles as a regular feature of the organisation.
Yeah, we can look at that.
Perhaps Councillor Hayfield, you can forward some information on quality circles.
I will
to
indeed.
Tina.
There's a wonderful paper by Toyota about that.
Oh, also noted, Honey, did you have something you wanted to say about this?
Oh, sorry, this was going back to the audits themselves, thinking about practitioners' feedback and experience and being done to. And before the new audit process was launched, there was consultation with managers because we're very mindful of that. But the new process, you're actually sat down, or the peer auditor is sat down with that social worker and having those discussions, because we're very mindful that's one social worker, and you know, there's lessons for multi-agency, there might be lessons for the organisation, so it's a much deeper kind of conversation as you're looking through the child's file, and that's an opportunity for practitioners to talk about those areas perhaps where they might be struggling or have particular difficulty, or there might be barriers that will kind of feed into the outcomes of the audits. So we're very mindful about the kind of being done to approach, and we were actually discussing today about different mechanisms that we can put into place to get practitioner feedback and forums where they've got the voice you know, they're able to express what's going on and to give feedback and to give suggestions. And then we can look at a kind of a you said, we did, which is really important for them.
One more thing to say on it. I'm very happy with the answers you're giving here. But in the reports, it's all about the voice of the family, the voice of the child, which of course we all agree with. But perhaps we could see a little bit there about the voice of the workers mentioned specifically. You are doing a lot actually, but it doesn't come clear from the quality report, the quality assurance reports. So maybe we could sort of massage them a little bit so we can see that the both sides is being reflected.
Yeah, I suspect that's because what you're looking for is reflected more in the workforce strategy.
So I think again what we're hearing is that as part of that improvement journey, that individual practitioners are being able to get the opportunity to improve their own practice, to be sort of peer informed, and so we're sort of building up that improvement from the sort of right from the bottom, well, from all angles really. It appears that that's the intention. Councillor Proctor, you had a question?
It has been answered already. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other members? Yes, Councillor Davis.
Yes. Hello. I want to just want to talk about earlier on. You were talking about the social workers and the continuity, which is very, very good. What happens when there's a problem when the children like the social worker, but the adults don't seem to be able to get on with the social worker? How do you cope with that?
So if there's a request, and it will be very often, it's not uncommon actually to get a request from a parent to change the social worker. For exactly the reasons that you say. The social worker isn't getting on with the parents don't get on with the social worker. They're challenging what's being said. They perhaps don't like the challenge that's about their parenting. Our starting point for making a decision about whether or not we will change the social worker always starts with, is there a relationship between that social worker and that child that needs to be sustained and protected? Once we've taken that into account, we will look at our second point, which is really important, is that you will get the best out of people if they feel that they are working with you. So there is, there's no point in working with a social worker and a family where there's a completely broken down relationship, because the family are going to close down. They're not going to work openly, and actually you're giving the social worker almost an impossible job. So we do change social workers if both of those things show us that the best way to continue to work with this family and get their engagement is by changing the social worker. But we would always look and see whether or not we felt that the child had got a relationship. And that's not simply by going and asking the child, I have to say, either, because it would not be reasonable or appropriate in many circumstances to go and ask the child, do you want to change your social worker? Your mum and dad have asked if we should we? Because that puts an inappropriate pressure on the child to have to either agree or disagree, worse for some children, with what their parents are saying. So we will look at how long that social work has been allocated. We will look at whether or not that child has been engaging in the visits that the social worker has been doing, whether they've got lots of engagement, lots of conversation, and whether we're getting a real understanding from that child. And so sometimes we may just say, no, we're not changing the social worker. But if that's not there, and the parents, we really are clashing with this social worker, we don't want to work with them, we will change it once. If that is requested again, then again, there's another level of consideration that you need to give then, isn't there? Because we don't just keep changing social workers because parents keep asking, because they keep on not liking the message that's being given in terms of any particular concerns.
Chair, can I just come back? So, is there a policy in place where you have the parents come together with a social worker to actually work out what is the problem here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we that would be the informal opportunity to actually sit down and say, what are the issues, what are the challenges? Let's try and work that through. That would happen automatically in the beginning. It's only, I was just describing what happens if that doesn't work and the parent specifically says, I would like a different social worker.
Thank you. Dylan, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I did want to come into that because I think it's quite an important concept, I think, within the context of Herefordshire. One of the pieces of learning from our auditing is actually that families, when they give the feedback as part of the case auditing process, generally give very good feedback about their social workers. They give good feedback about the relationship building skills that the social workers and other workers have with them, which is really encouraging. I think what needs development is how that's evidenced in the case filing, in the recording, basically. The other thing I'd say about it as well is that we've just started the family feedback, and we've been calling families who've recently been closed to social care and asking them directly for their feedback about their social worker and about the work we've done. And what's encouraging, it's very early days, what's encouraging is the feedback being given by families is really, really positive. So they're all saying, or nearly all saying, that the social worker made a positive difference. The social worker couldn't have done anything more, and they've given concrete examples of the help that's been given. And I think I was quite pleased and a little bit surprised by how positive the feedback was, and really encouraged, because I think there's been a narrative that our social workers maybe aren't doing as much as they could, but actually, in reality, they're actually making a difference to families on a day-to-day and children on a day-to-day basis. But we've got to be a lot more proactive about asking them and recording that really well, so we can show it.
So I just wonder if there's an opportunity there to actually celebrate that more, and if we do put something like the quality assurance framework up, and is there an opportunity to put in some quotes? Just because you're right, the narrative has been very negative, and I think social workers have had a lot of really bad press. So if there is a good story to be heard, then I think that we should encourage that story as part of our kind of relational work across the board. Tina, did you want to come back, and then Councillor
Yeah, just
Proctor?
to say that the first thing we did, of course, is fed that back to the social workers so that they get that positive reinforcement. And as I've said, we are making sure that the quarterly complaint reports are complement and complaint reports, so that they reflect that in detail, and we'll make sure that gets fed back. We won't be doing ongoing quotes in the quality assurance framework, because that's a set document, and what we want is the opportunities to make sure that we keep updating what parents and children are telling us, and that's what we'll be doing in the quarterly quality assurance reports.
And is there a way also to include comms on that, so that when there is a quarterly report, somebody from the comms team is actually dispersing some of that information, so there is a kind of regular sort of drip feeding of that kind of information outside of the confines of children's services?
Yeah, I just think we have to be mindful of always giving the both sides, rather than at any one quarter. For me, it's not about at the end of the quarter saying this is our service user feedback, and through comms, it's very difficult in comms when you're talking about public comms, because they want everything bite-sized. Everybody wants everything bite-sized. Everybody wants everything as a headline, don't they, in terms of what's covered in whether it be social media or the press. And the reality is that this is not bite-sized. I don't want to be selective and say, we've spoken this last week, we spoke to 8 parents, and do you know what? 7 out of those 8 parents said we'd made a really positive difference, that the social worker couldn't have done any more. 6 of them said they built great relationships with their social workers. That's great. Of course, that's great. The minute we put that out in comms, somebody will say, well, that's only 7 parents. You're working with 700 parents. So we need to build that, and that's what we're doing. We're building up. That was week 1, and we managed to get 8 parents in terms of callbacks. We will build that picture, and we will be reporting back quarter on quarter, both what parents and children and young people are telling us, as well as what parents are telling us. And then at the end of the year, you know, we will pull together our annual report about how many children and young people we've spoken to, how many parents we've spoken to, and what they've told us over the year. So you can see what's happened over the quarters, you can see what happens next year. And I get, you know, you're possibly thinking, well, that's quarters away and the year away, but that will give us a baseline then for what we do the following year to make sure that we are sustaining that good experience as well as building on improvements.
Councillor Proctor actually had a question.
Once again, my question has been answered before I asked it. Thanks.
Councillor Davis.
Yes. Can I just ask, is when a social worker visits, is it always by appointment, or do they do any spot calling, knocking on the door? Everything's
Both.
by an appointment, is it?
No. Unannounced visits are part
That's
of
the word.
a dynamic assessment.
Yes. I was just a bit concerned about that the families would all be prepared, you know, for you to arrive. Okay, thank you.
If we can just move on to any of the specifics around auditing, if anybody's got questions. I think we've covered it quite well, but I just want to be clear in terms of sort of closing the loop. Is what you're saying, if specific issues have been identified through auditing around specific teams, that ongoing work is completed with that sort of team or individual until that audit. So let's say there's an inadequate audit. Sort of what happens to that that piece of work to bring it back up to scratch, and how is that recorded?
So all of the inadequates, and we had no inadequates in June, which was great, but all of the actions are recorded, and they are then followed up with the QA practitioner, the social worker and the team manager. And they are reviewed, and we gather assurance about actions, whether actions have been completed or what the plan is for them to be completed. There's a moderation process. They're reassessed and re-evaluated. In our new process, it will be the service manager or head of service that will look at the past 3 months to make sure that all the actions have been completed and that the service has improved for that child and family. So we've got those kind of immediate actions that are being tracked and ensured that they are being followed through. But there's also the kind of the wider learning for that. So are there any themes coming out of that particular inadequate audit? What are they? And then that's when we look at the targeted workshops that we're putting in place, the one-to-one support for practitioners. We've got best practice briefings. So we're kind of tackling it from different areas. And the audits, then we will be re-auditing dip samples as well if there are particular areas that we want to focus on. We can audit them down the line to see, has this been approved? Have these interventions actually worked, and what else do we need to do? So it's with the QA team, the operational team, the senior managers, as well as the practitioners that are all on board in terms of driving improvement.
Dylan.
Yeah, there's just 2 other small points. There's also an escalation process if the audit actions are not being completed. So it goes up the management chain, effectively, ultimately up to the service director to ensure that those audit actions are closed down. And the other thing to say, I think, positively, is that we are seeing a reduction in inadequates. So there are far fewer now than when I started in post about 18 months ago. where we were looking at about 30% of all audits were inadequate. So for the last quarter, it's only 9%.
Thank you, both of you. And Councillor Proctor?
I have two different questions on auditing, if that's all right. So the first is, I honestly, I don't know how feasible this is, but is it feasible to involve children, young people, care experienced adults in the auditing process? And do we do that? Or do we have plans to do that?
We do that, yeah, as part of the monthly case auditing process. There are specific questions to ask children and young people about the work and the casework. Is that not quite what you meant?
So not the child that is the subject of the plan that's being audited, but it's maybe not a very good analogy, but I'm thinking of like tenant inspectors in housing associations who are involved in going and checking on that. Obviously, that doesn't involve many of the complexities you have in your situation, but so bringing people who have experience of this general situation into the auditing process.
I think if we're looking at case auditing, that would obviously pose some ethical questions in terms of confidentiality. I think we could certainly involve children and young people in the analysis and the focus, if you like, in the process. But I think it'd be very tricky to actually have them auditing other children and young people's files, especially in a place like Herefordshire, which is so interconnected.
So, would it be a good idea to involve them in the analysis?
Yeah, definitely. I think that would be really, really helpful. I think they'll when we work with children and people, they're very, very quick at analysing and setting targets for us, and very astute as well. So yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
We've done a piece of work, Dylan and the participation lead, to develop a children and young people's plan within the priority plan. And that was asking them about what are their priorities, and they're very much reflected in our improvement plan. So talking to them about were they ever contacted as part of an audit, what did that feel like, how did that work for them, is absolutely something that we can do. I'm very conscious at the moment that we've got quite newly developed participation groups, which is where we find groups of children and young people, largely those that in care or care leavers. And they're quite new, and we want to engage those children and feel like they're doing activities together, just as fun, just as time out, just as, you know, let's make some links. We're all looked after children, you know, can we make some friends? There's somebody else that's experiencing being looked after or a care leaver. We've had this discussion around, I'm keen that at this stage that we don't see them as a quick fix and actually, we could ask that group this, and we could ask that group this, and because I don't want them to start feeling very quickly, I thought I was coming to bake cakes or to go for a run, and you've sat me down and asked me another set of questions. And so, you know, and in terms of the audit process, as we've described, you know, we've got a new audit process. We need to get it embedded. We need to learn what it's telling us. And I think that the ways that we're developing now from talking to children and young people, we need to do that for the rest of this year and embed that. We will then always be able to then look at, right, okay, what can we do at another level? What can we do that's even better or something different to add on to? So I think, if I'm honest, I think let's embed this framework, embed these auditing process, these service user feedback into our workforce. Let's see where that goes. Let's get our participation groups up and running with more children and young people going to them. Let's get the processes in place for talking to more children and young people, and then kind of see where we are and how we might bring more people into the process.
I think everything you've said makes total sense. And certainly, I think the local authorities are really terrible at kind of bringing people in on our terms, rather than so we should definitely be working with children and young people to and they should identify what that. So I get that completely. Everything you said makes sense, but I'm also conscious that we have not developed a culture of embedding, talking to children and young people, and so we will have to we have to do things that are not necessarily comfortable, that we think are a bit too fast at some stage, and there's a risk that if we wait.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about co-production more, and it's definitely something that we need to do. I just think, in terms of where we're at now, 17th of September, I don't want us to delay on anyone thinking we're now going to go out and do some co-production work on our auditing process. For me, it's far more important. We've done this process. You're absolutely right. We didn't engage children and young people in terms of what the audit looked like or the process for it. And that might be something we do in the future. But I don't want to give anybody any reason to think, oh, our framework's not ready. Our process is still under development. This workforce, we need to be clear, it is now agreed, this is the new process, it's in place, this is what we're doing, and we will develop that throughout the rest of this year, and then potentially look at, you know, that kind of thing that you're talking about later in the year, early next year.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got several actually. First of all, just to sort of summarise where we're at with QA. From what you've said, we've got a framework that has come to the committee today in terms of the framework we're working to at the moment. As councillors, we know that there's a briefing process that's going on at the moment, which is providing councillors with an update on specifically QA and, well, basically the agenda that we've got here in this meeting, the updated improvement plan and QA. We've had, as a supplement to our agenda papers, some information on the detail of the quality assurance that has been underway just recently, so that we've actually got some information about the kind of performance figures that we're currently seeing in terms of where the service is now. But the QA framework is on the cusp of being updated and looking a little bit different, and that updated framework will be the one that is used to take and follow the implementation of the updated improvement plan forward over the next weeks and months. So in a sense, where it's good that we're looking at next on the agenda the updated improvement plan, we're kind of in a bit of an in-between place with this QA framework, in that we've been presented with the one that we have been working to, and you've been telling us about some of the changes that are being made to improve and update on that, to take it forward. That's in a nutshell where we're at.
I say, just for clarity, the framework document that you've got before you, yes, that is not updated to reflect the here and now, but the here and now process, the tools, the gradings, the process, that is in place now. So it is just this document, and that's just timing in terms of just being able to change the picture from Daryl, take off, make sure that those three key things, it is just the wording. As I've said, there's nothing wrong with that framework. We just need to make sure that that framework is clearer. The actual practice and the process are in place now. They are not still in development.
No, understood. Understood, and thank you for that clarification. Also, thank you for the information that was provided in the agenda supplement. It is always tricky when we're looking at a process, but it helps to understand the process to be able to see what's passing through it like a pipe. So having that information is useful, and I think for future reference, I think as far as this committee is concerned, where we have agenda items that come forward that can be enhanced in terms of our and the public's understanding by providing some real live information about how that process is being used and what it's telling us, please can we have that provided as a matter of course in order to help to inform the understanding and the way in which we can scrutinise on the day.
Absolutely, that's a really good idea, and what we will do is make sure that for whatever the heading of the scrutiny agenda item is, if there is a relevant part of any one of the QA points that can feed into that, we will obviously make sure that that becomes part and parcel of the report.
I think that would be really helpful for the committee and also for the public. Moving on then, the information that was provided in the supplement and the information that's being briefed to councillors again this evening, so we're in the middle of that briefing process, indicates that progress is being made in a number of areas, sustained progress, which is really good to see. And I think we should recognise that and celebrate it. Alongside that, the QA and the briefings are highlighting where there remain issues, some of them quite significant, and those are being brought out in some of the inadequate assessments that are coming forward through the audit process itself. I welcome that the decision's been taken to start auditing across the entire operation. Clearly, it has made sense in the past to do some deep dives, but given that the process, the service is as integrated as it is, being able to deal with cross-cutting issues and ensuring broad oversight of the delivery of the service sort of end to end, that's really important to be getting that overall audit view. So please could you explain, I mean, looking at the numbers of audits that have been undertaken, it looks like the latest month's audit was about half as many cases as the previous 2 months. Was that because it was looking across the organisation, so they were complex and took a bit longer, or what was the reason for the significant reduction in numbers?
2 reasons really. One was because we had a bit of a summer recess. The month of August and July, August is a really challenging month. You know, every workforce has holidays. People are then covered while their colleagues are on holidays. We also had a new improvement plan, and we were in the development stages of the new process that we've just talked through. So a little bit of a stop breather space while we finished the old process and the audits that were taking place in there before we then moved on to starting this implementation of the new process in September. So both that breather, staff down, but also let's have a bit of clear water between this was the old process, now we're going to start the new process at the beginning of September. So that's why we did less. And your point around across the service, you know, I agree with entirely. You know, that for some children, not all, but for some, that journey through our services is their journey. And so what we don't want is to know that they come to the front door and get an assessment, which is a great quality assessment and build a good relationship, and then they end up on a child protection plan, which is poor quality, and their updated assessment, or there's no relationship with the social worker. So that's why for us it's been important that we understand across the service where things are at and where the improvements are.
Thank you. Moving on to talking about parents and the voice of the child. You know, as counsellors, we've been being told for more than 2 years that the voice of the child is really important to us, really important to the service. and that's something that we recognise, and Ofsted and DFE, etc., LGA have all been telling us that we need to get better at engaging with parents and children, understanding and capturing the voice of the child. So that's been a message received 2 years ago. Very many briefings we have as counsellors, and you know, our staff tell us, you know, voice of the child, really important. I am struggling in this meeting today to square that longitudinal view of the message and the story that we've been receiving in briefing after briefing, and indeed the description that voice of the child, feedback from children and families, is one of the 3 legs of the QA process, and the QA process has been going for a good 18 months. For us to be hearing today quite how patchy, poor and, you know, low in number the actual evidence is that we are capturing this. It would be helpful to understand the difference if we talk about you said we did. Well, you said you didn't, and I'd kind of like to know what the problem is that has meant that we've said all this stuff and haven't done it, and what assurance you can provide this committee and the public through this committee that things are going to be different now.
Okay, so when we talk about the voice of the child, there are 3 elements to the voice of the child. One of them is the voice of the child coming through casework. So you may have heard the term the lived experience of the child, understanding the lived experience of the child. And that's what we mean when we talk about working social worker, social care worker with the child. Have we heard the voice of the child? Have we understood? Have we listened to what they've said? Have we heard their voice? Can we see that in the work that we've done with them? Have we done direct work with them? Have we heard that voice? Do we know what their lived experience is like? That's one element of the voice of the child, and there has been focus on that element in Herefordshire. What we haven't been great at is finding mechanisms to drill down and capture where we're doing that well. So it's always been part of the case file audit. Have we heard the voice of the child? Can you see that child's lived experience on the file? It's been part of the audit always, and it's been built into that audit as part of the development over the last 2 years. The analysis of that, I think, as Dylan's tried to describe earlier, or I was just saying, is not sufficiently been broken down to looking at where we're doing that well and where we're not doing it well. But actually the voice of the child in casework we're seeing in audit is there. What we haven't been doing is a different element, which is going and asking the child, separate to that one-to-one work on their case, but in a separate conversation. So tell me, do you feel that you received your plan? Do you know why you're on a plan? We might do it in casework, but actually the voice of the child needs to come through this other mechanism, and that's where we are building now those processes in place. And those questions are, you know, we're asking children at a different time. So we're asking them at the point of closure of an intervention, which is important for a child, because while we're working with them, you're asking those questions as part of the casework. But actually, once we've completed an assessment or we've completed an intervention, it's also important to go back to them and ask them then, did you know why you were on a plan? What was that like? And so it's this element here where we haven't been doing that very well. There has been pockets of that happening, but not consistently and not sufficient engagement. And it's not been picked up sufficiently to recognise that we've got a gap here. We've had a bit too much talk about, well, we're doing this with the casework and we've got it in our plan and we are doing some of this, but we haven't gripped it enough to understand how little of it we're actually getting engagement back. We've now gripped that, we understand it. And the third element is the one I was talking earlier about, which is participation. So when we've been talking about Voice for the Child historically, there's also been an understanding that participation, that's also how you get the voice from the child and you engage children, you know, in participation groups for children looked after. Again, that's been another area of work which has had some development. So that's been quite positive, but again, we need to make sure that we are balancing all three of these things to give us the voice of the child and not confusing or relying on any one area of those to be in place and giving us feedback so that we can say, yes, we're hearing the voice of the child. We need to do all three. And that's what we're doing now. So the assurance that I can give you is that, you know, we're constantly learning and challenging, you know, the way that we do things. It's always helpful to have new people that are coming in with experience of doing things. We've had a little bit of both of that. And you've heard me describe, you know, if anybody wants to listen to my staff meeting recording of yesterday, you're welcome to. You know, we're delivering that repeatedly to the staff to engage them, to understand there are three elements here about when we're talking about voice of the child. We've now gripped that, we understand it, and that's part of our improvement plan. And we can now improve on, we can now report on it, because that's the other part of that is that even where we have been doing it, we've not been great at pulling that information out of the system and reporting on it. And we need to get better at that. And as Dylan said, you know, when we do that, we may well find that we get great feedback, like we did from the 8 parents that we spoke to last week. We may, and I think we will, find that we get a lot more positive feedback to do as you've both said, you know, bring that voice of the parent that actually thinks Children's Services in Herefordshire have helped them and done a good thing for them. Making sure that that group have got a voice as well is important.
Last point then, reading directly from the stocktake slide to do with reporting on voice of the child from the councillor briefing, the third bullet point says that a culture change is needed in our approach to meet the aspirations of the Phase 2 improvement plan, which we'll come on to in a bit, and we have to do much more and make the collection of feedback from children a routine activity. Now, we, along with this whole improvement journey, we've heard all the way through and repeatedly that we need to effect culture change. Culture change is needed here, it's needed there, it's needed everywhere. And it, you know, I don't underestimate, it is a really tough thing to achieve. And I'm just wondering how, given that it is as tough as it is, where in the QA framework are we able to identify things that we're looking at that are giving us assurance on that culture change journey? And it may be that it's, you know, a sort of an aggregation, a summing up of lots of little bits, but, you know, that assurance of that culture change, because it's not just about change and then backslide, it's about change and embed and, you know, dig in and push forward.
Yeah. So for me, the culture of an organisation is its people. It's not something that we can send people on a training course to do, or workshops or briefing. It is the people, and it's led by, you know, its managers and its leaders in the way that we do things. So, you know, having the processes and the tools in place to make sure that we lead a culture that wants to listen to its children. That's what we're wanting to do, and the way of working is enabling us to do that. We want to build all these participation groups. We want to make sure that we're hearing from more children as part of the audit and as part of understanding the difference that we made. So we're building that process and that way of working into our organisation. The culture, evidence of the culture change will come when we can see the staff making sure that, you know, we're promoting that and getting those children to feedback, that we are monitoring all the time whether the families have fed back, whether the children and young people have fed back. I think you're right. It's that it's, you know, it will come through as a way of working, as a way. The restorative practice itself is building that cultural change. The way we talk, you know. Are we working with families to manage risk within families and within the community, rather than being risk averse or succumbing to professional anxiety about managing risk? You know, it's the conversations, it's the language, it's the way that we work. And you know, for me, that the cultural change on this aspect was to challenge that high level conversation. Yes, we are talking to children. Well, actually, our stocktake report, which is why we did it, was called a stocktake report, was us challenging ourselves. Are we? Are we really properly listening to children? Everybody's saying we want to, but actually what we found was we might want to, but we weren't giving them the opportunity to. So I don't doubt that people want to listen to them, but we weren't providing a sufficient opportunity to do that. So that's why we've developed these more opportunities, these more as part of the process. So it's the process, it's the conversation, it's the leadership, it's all of those things that will influence and change the culture of an organisation.
Okay, but going back to my question, in terms of the QA framework and the new way we're going to be doing it, what is it that we are going to be doing which is going to give assurance that that culture change in terms of making the collection of feedback from children a routine activity, what are we doing that is going to deliver that assurance?
So that's the requirement that we're making as managers and leaders about the QA work that takes place, as I've said, the audit, the overarching one, but the individual one in each of the service areas, and the expectation and the monitoring and the tracking of reporting back on that. So it's that culture of management and leadership that's kind of affects the culture that we have, our systems, our processes, the way of working. So you won't see it written as we're going to do a cultural change in the QA framework. It is the very QA framework that's being implemented in the service, and our requirements as managers to receive those reports back on a quarterly basis, to analyse them, to feedback. It's the way of working that is the culture of the organisation. If we were to develop the QA framework and then say, okay, service areas, you need to develop your mini QA framework, and then we stop, and we never go back and say, have you done your audits? Have you done your service user feedback? Let me see the report. Let me analyse it. Let me see what was said. Then we're never going to affect the culture. It is having the processes and that expectation, and that agreed. We talked about it at the staff conference. Do we want a culture of a restorative practice was built on that? That was done. Before I came. Why do we want restorative practice? What's that going to be? It's going to be about working with families in a more positive way as early as possible, building on their strengths, building on relationships. That went through the organisation. Do we want to all work like that? Yes. If we'd have stopped there, well, that's not going to change the culture because we're not doing it. So we had to build in a model that we've trained people on in order that they can achieve that. So that's another way that we've influenced the culture of the organisation.
So we will see in 2-3 months' time that there will be evidence within the results of the audits that have gone on following this updated QA framework that will show movement on this as an important leg of the domain of the audit process.
You will see by the end of the year that each of the service areas have got their own mini programme in place. You will see by the end of the year or at the end of October, you'll see Q2 analysis of what we've been doing in process. January, you'll see Q3. Each of the service areas will then be able to start feeding in their own little service area QA programmes, some targeted audit as a result. You will see those things building into practice as normal, yeah.
I think I'd like to make a recommendation that possibly we get a report back in 6 months' time to Scrutiny just about this issue specific to the voice of young people and the kind of work that has been done, so that we can actually see what progress has been made on it.
Yep.
May I ask a very short question?
Yeah.
Thank you. And hopefully a very short answer. By what time do you expect you will be satisfied as director that you're getting sufficient feedback from children and families?
I think we need, we're in Q2. We've done our stock take and our challenge in Q1. We'll see it starting to embed in Q2, Q3, sorry, in terms of October, November, December. I expect to get to Q3 and come back with making sure that we've got more challenge and have we done it as well as we can. I would expect by the end of Q4 to feel confident that it's embedded in the service.
So by Q4 is your answer?
But to be well embedded in terms of the service so that we can be confident that it's part and parcel of everybody's practice now. That said, even after Q4, we will never not be able to step away from that. It becomes but it will become business as usual. But we will get to the end of, we're now in September, so we're at the end of Q2, aren't we? Q3 is October, November, December, where we'll be embedding it. That's what we'll be doing. At the end of Q3, I expect to come back with us as a leadership feedback to the workforce. Have we done this well in all areas? Are there areas that we could have done it better or need to do it better? Let's do that for Q4 so that we've really learned and embedded it by the end of the year, so that by next year, yes, our quality assurance programme becomes business as usual.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, time is marching on. One of the questions I had around this, but it can actually fall under the improvement plan item, was just really about the partnership and partnership engagement in this whole process. But as the QA actually forms the sort of outer layer of the improvement plan on a page, it can come then. I just thought we should have a 5-minute break, but Councillor Powell, I wanted to just ask you if you have any sort of concluding comments on the QA and auditing information that we've had today.
Only very briefly. Firstly, to recognise the renewed vigour that the director and her top team have brought to this. The detailed understanding of the different levels of securing voice of the child has been articulated is particularly important. Recognition that there was work that was going on, but not in the depth and breadth that as has been outlined. I just wanted to reflect the difficult nature of social work and working with families and children. This happens at a moment in time for some families where they have a statutory intervention in their lives which probably doesn't feel very welcome. And so it is really, really important that relationship building is key, both with the child and with the parents. I'm glad that Councillor Highfield asked some questions about the workforce, because of course we need to have the trust and confidence in our families to work with them, but we also need to acknowledge that at the centre of all of this, at certain moments in time, will be a child or children who are suffering significant harm, and therefore they have to be at the centre of it. So just to acknowledge that, you know, it is difficult stuff for social care and social care workers, but importantly, to reinforce that the restorative practice model that we've adopted, we're being supported by our improvement partner Leeds to implement, and staff are being trained, and indeed shortly there will be rollout of that training across the partnership agencies, that the restorative practice model seeks to, where it is safe to do so, manage the risk to children within their families and their family network, so that we can get the best outcomes for them.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Dylan and Honey for the report, the presentation. If you would like to stay for the bit about the improvement plan, please do. But if you feel that you would like to go, I think you'd be free to go. If we can have a 5-minute break, and then we can also just sort of conclude any recommendations that come from this, and we'll move on to the improvement plan item. And I would really like to try and finish by 5 o'clock. Thank you. Can the live Robert, are you? That's okay. Yeah, pull back in. We're recording again. Okay, thank you, everyone. If we can just quickly go through the two recommendations. Microphone is not working. Apparently, okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, good. If we can quickly go through the two recommendations that came out of that discussion, see if we agree on them. Hopefully, we will, and then we can just move on to the improvement plan part of the meeting. So, Daniel, as a statutory scrutiny officer, are you happy to read out the recommendations?
Yes, I am, Chair. I'm not ready to put them on the screen, but I am ready to read them out.
Okay. Do you want me to read them out?
No,
Oh,
I can read
you
them
do
out.
that,
I
okay.
just can't put them on the screen at the moment. So, but I will read them out. So, you've proposing two recommendations, which read as follows: 1, adopt unique children's services values. Children's services should adopt their own set of values and principles, separate from the corporate council values. These should be displayed on a child and family-friendly page on the Herefordshire Council website, alongside a user-friendly guide to the quality assurance framework, ensuring the frameworks and values are publicly accessible and reinforcing the strength-based, restorative approach to cultural change. And the second, child and young person involvement in audits. The service should explore ways to involve children and young people in the analysis associated with the auditing process, ensuring their experiences and feedback contribute to service improvement.
Thank you. Councillor Hayfield, you've got a comment.
Well, can I recommend a third recommendation, that the service adopts quality circles as a way of getting staff feedback?
Okay. Can we put that recommendation that the service considers?
Yeah, because they can reject any of our recommendations if they've got good enough
yes,
reasons.
of course.
So
Okay. All right. Everybody happy to include that? Yep. Okay. So those three recommendations. Do you need to type up the third one?
I do actually, yes. So, could you possibly send that over to me?
that the service adopts quality circles as...
One moment.
I have faith in you, Daniel. It's all right.
Yep.
Adopts quality circles as a means of getting staff feedback.
That the service adopts quality circles as a means of getting staff feedback.
Yeah.
I would like that to be softened to explores, because I'm not personally that wedded to quality circles. I think it's a thing they should explore. I'm not convinced I want to recommend they should definitely do it.
Can we put explores rather than adopts, please? Explores.
If the committee's happy to, yes.
Well, I think it's splitting hairs. If they don't like the idea, and I will write something so they can consider it. If they don't like the idea, they can come back and say, we don't think it works.
Okay, so it is an exploration then. I think if we cannot split hairs, so we can move on. That's yes. Okay.
It's your recommendation. What do you want on it?
Can you put explores, please? Yeah.
Okay, then fine. So the third recommendation reads as follows: that the service explores quality circles as a means of getting staff feedback.
Okay.
Yep. Do you need to put those up on the screen, or can we? No, that's okay. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can actually just look at these alongside any other recommendations at the end.
You can do that if you want to, Chair.
Okay, if we can do that, and if we can just move on to the next item about the improvement plan. So we'll have a look at those recommendations as part of the complete set at the end, if that's okay. So the next item on the agenda is looking at the improvement plan, phase 2. Yes, Director Tina Russell, if you could just give us an intro to this, please.
Certainly, thank you. So I've got the overview paper, but you've also importantly got a copy of the plan. This phase 2 plan was agreed by the multi-agency improvement board in July and signed off formally on the 11th of September by that board. What this phase 2 plan does in terms of how it's written, there's a first section there that really just tries to set out some of the very headlines of things that have been achieved since 2022, 23, 24, just to bring people up to date that work has been taking place. But what it then does is to move into a phase 2 plan, which tries to be much more focused on what it is we need to do. As I've said in my overview report, we had received 3 monitoring visits, and each of those monitoring visits, whilst finding some improvements, challenged significantly on the pace of improvement and the consistency of improvement across the services. And so this plan tries to address that by becoming, I guess, stripping back a little bit, right back to the Ofsted recommendations. What were the 9 areas of service that Ofsted said we weren't doing well? And they're introduced on the individual plan on a page. And so that document sets out what those 9 recommendations were. And then it sets out under each of those recommendations a set of measures. And each of those measures you will find is incorporated into one of the 3 elements of the quality assurance framework. So it might be a KPI, it might be something that we're going to ask children, young people or families, or it might be something that we will evidence progress on through our audit activity. And we have developed 3 reports in terms of feeding back on a quarterly basis, a KPI dashboard that sits under the improvement plan, the audit activity, as I've just described, so that will be taking place in the service areas. How are we asking children these specific questions? Do you feel safe in your placement, for example? And then in terms of service user feedback, and then audit activity, which we've just described, we've done that. So each time we go back to the improvement board every quarter, we will have those 3 reports that give us the mechanism to describing the improvements that have been made under the quality assurance measures that we've assigned to the plan. Section 2 then sets out, under each of those Ofsted recommendations, a number of actions that we want to take place that we believe are necessary to drive forward the ability of individuals, the ability of the service and the ability of the partnership to bring about that improvement which has been identified as we need. So there's a lot more detail in terms of those actions, and there's a lead person for each of those actions. So again, when we go to the improvement board, and we did this in September for the first time, we had a progress report that went back to the improvement board. So overall, I think what the phase 2 does is it refocuses a little bit, introduces measures and introduces a process by which we can better report on a more regular basis what difference those measures are making. You asked in the last session about partnership, so it is a partnership plan. The improvement board has been revised its terms of reference and its membership. It is a multi-agency partnership representation. And it's chaired by the Commissioner, the DFE Commissioner. in terms of partnership on audit activities, we do partnership audits together as a multi-agency group through the Safeguarding Board, and they're part of the safeguarding plan. But as part of our audit activity, we also ask the question when we're doing audits to parents and children, how do you think the multi-agency working together has worked for you? Do you think we've worked well together or not? Have the right people been involved in working with your family or not? And if not, who's been missing? So we ask those kind of questions, both from us as a local authority asking about partnership, but we also do partnership multi-agency audits, for example, at the front door on contributions to strategy discussions, discussions on strategy discussions, outcomes that have been agreed. Let's look at those, you know, and our indicators as well. So the plan on the page has been a particular valuable document so that our workforce don't have to worry about the details of all of the actions that are in there. They can just concentrate as an individual or as a manager responsible for a team or a service manager. What are the measures that are going to show us that we are improving? So the activity is taking place, as I say, to create the systems, the processes, the culture that can enable those people to improve. That's what the activity is about. And I guess the other bit that I would particularly draw your attention to, and then I will stop because I know I have a tendency to go on. Two things. One is recommendation 1. Where you'll see that was about the corporate responsibility around help and protection. That's clearly set out there with its actions, and that's where we really capture where are we taking this vision that we all have to be child-friendly Herefordshire. Again, we talked about that, you know, we want to have a culture where we listen to the voice of the children. So this is about, we've talked about that, so what are we actually going to do? How are we going to achieve that as a council? And so you'll see the activity in that is there. We've already started to connect with Warwickshire as our neighbour county authority, who have got who are further down the lane on their further down the road on their journey to be child-friendly Warwickshire. So we've got a group of key members that are leading our children's services to go along and visit Warwickshire to hear about what they're doing, and then we'll bring that back to us as a council, also through our parish councils and town councils, to look at, well, what can we all do then to make this happen? What does that actually look like for us? So that's just an example of what we're doing around that recommendation 1. And recommendation 2 is specifically about that workforce. And so you'll see the actions there: undertake a voice of the workforce, for example, of the workforce. And as I said to you, we've done that. It's been launched this week. Complete the workforce strategy. That's done. So these are measures, these are activities that we're better at. There's a lead person, and I think we've gripped more how we are making sure that these actions, because they are more specific and explicit, can be monitored for has it been completed or not, rather than perhaps more visionary activity that might have been there before. So staff can focus on what do your KPIs look like, what will your children say, this is the plan on the page. Where it's activity, there's a lead person, and we're reporting back to the improvement board on a 6-weekly basis. Other than that, that's there's the QA, which we're not going to talk about because we've talked about that a lot. But that's phase 2. This is phase 2 of the plan, and we are making progress. We went to the board on the 11th with our first report back to board. I felt, as director, really pleased with the activity that we were able to report back that we had done and completed, and it was in place. You know, we weren't talking, well, we still want to do this and it's still in process. It was very much these things have been done. So, and that was just our first board meeting. So,
thank you, Councillor Hurfield. Can I just start the questioning, and then I'll come back to you. It's great to see this plan. It's great to see that there's actually an action plan there, and I think that one of the difficulties has been struggling to gauge what the impact has been of the huge amount of investment that's gone into the improvement plan, and one of the criticisms repeatedly has been the pace of change. So, I mean, do you anticipate when Ofsted come in for the monitoring visit in October? I mean, what are you anticipating their response will be, sort of to this plan? Have we done enough self-assessment to get a feeling of where we are currently?
I've already shared this plan with our lead Ofsted inspector. She was very positive about it being much more focused, and felt that that was a very helpful way forward in her experience to really focus people on exactly as what we've tried to do. She said, yeah, this reads to me like a better, more focused plan in terms of being able to know what it is that you're doing. I think when they come next for their monitoring visit, they will see, feel, hear a positive, engaged workforce. That's what I'm hearing and seeing. I've got lots of feedback from workers across managers, but frontline workers of all disciplines, feeding back. Yeah, really helpful. I get this plan. I understand it now. I understand what we're doing within it. So that's really good. And the same from partners. So the partnership board also really pleased with that feedback. So I'm confident that that will absolutely come through. There is a particular targeted area for each of the monitoring visits, as I'm sure that you know. And so, you know, we are, if I say we're preparing for that Ofsted monitoring visit now, we're not 100% where they will target, and Ofsted are very, very good at having a focus key line of inquiry, but then of course that takes them into all roads that lead to this key line of inquiry as well. So when I say we prepare for that, that's not about doing anything different. It is about showcasing the practice that we are doing. And, you know, I think they will see a workforce that want to continue to do it and feel that they are in a place where they are getting that managerial leadership and grip on making those improvements. That's what I think that they will find. And I think that that will continue to increase and increase as Ofsted continue their monitoring visits with us.
Thank you. And Councillor Highfield, your question.
Yes, I wasn't going to say anything, but you said in your introduction to this that what you don't want to see is sort of just aspirations and not action. But in these actions we will take list here, a couple of them are aspirations rather than specific actions. For example, develop ways to capture voices of children. We've talked about that extensively in our earlier session. I know there are concrete actions in place, but that's just an aspiration. And likewise, the last one, capture the voices of children, another aspiration. There are actually factual things we are doing which are actions, not aspirations. So I'm not sure that comes across as clearly as it ought to in that list of actions.
I take the point, but it is impossible to write that level of detail. How, you know, I've described at length the action, the activity behind that action to capture the voice of the child, how we're actually implementing that, the development of surveys, the use of staff, that, you know, all of those things are in place. I can't write an action plan that's going to have that level of detail. So that is about making sure that we have got grip and we can respond to that. So I take the point, but I've tried as much as possible not to just write overarching, we would like to be an improved service.
I don't know if it's possible within the context of this, but perhaps a link to an annex which lists the specific actions that are taken to fulfil that aspiration might make it clearer. Because I know you're doing a lot, you've explained it earlier, right? But this simply says you know, there's a couple of them
Yeah,
there
yeah,
that say
yeah,
we
yeah.
have a dream to do this. You know.
That for me will come back in the progress reports that we send back to board on a 6 weekly basis.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
I generally think this improvement plan is much easier to understand than the previous improvement plan, and it seems to make sense to address the things that Ofsted said were particularly wrong. I guess my wider question is about, we're trying to affect change in a complex system, and you've got to be able to write down some actions that you're going to be able to take so that you can check that you've taken them. But the kind of nature of complex systems is it's an awful lot of people out there in different agencies having conversations, and I think we've talked in the first session a lot about how you're able to visualize what's going on in the council bit of that system, but how is the partnership able to do the same thing in the other bits of the system? Because it's not even just kind of agencies sitting in a child protection meeting. It's a DSL in a primary school talking to their head. So we can kind of make these changes, but they will have very unpredictable effects in the system. So how do we visualize what's going on in the system?
So there's partnership engagement throughout the plan. So restorative practice being an example, we may say, you know, implement restorative practice across the partnership. When we report back on that, we will be able to say that the single agency briefings to partner agencies have started this week. In fact, the one this week, the one was led for education. Health is taking place next month, and then in December we're starting multi-agency workshops on working through restorative practice in operation, so that multi-agency groups come together and talk about cases. So multi-agency audits, as I said at the front door, you know, that targeted activity that's taking place. Dylan was just talking about a particular piece of work that we're doing with partners around children with mental health. These are the things that we will report back. So the partnership is there throughout it, but it's owned by us. It's our children's services that's been adjudged inadequate. That's why the partnership is fundamental around the outside, as you noted, as is the quality assurance framework. So it's there, it's activity that's taking place. You can see the lead where it's the safeguarding partnership has been named as the lead. That's the partnership link in there as well, that they're taking that particular activity through to an action as well.
So if I can come back about that multi-agency element, because on page 15 of the plan, it talks about timely and effective multi-agency arrangements to ensure children are protected and enter care when required. And one of the actions there is to engage the Herefordshire community of families in workshops and surveys to review and update our safeguarding threshold of intervention, to build a partnership foundation for working with families and agreeing right level of intervention at the right time. So I'm quite keen to know just a little bit more about that. This is obviously to do with the Working Together 23 guidelines and guidance. How is that consultation going to look in Herefordshire? Because I think one of the criticisms we've had is that the risk-averse response to intervention, and have we got the thresholds right? So this is a good opportunity for Herefordshire to respond to that question. So if you can just explain that process a little bit more.
So we've already booked 6 sessions to take place in each of the market towns. Actually, one was due to take place tomorrow, but we haven't had enough families or people that have signed on, so it's not going to take place. We've advertised it in the local children's centres and also through the safeguarding website. What we're going to try and do now is see where else we can advertise it. We haven't advertised it through social workers with the families that they're working with. Really because I wanted to try and get anybody from the Herefordshire community involved, not just families that we're currently working with. But obviously, if nobody's signed on, although it's been advertised through the local children's centre and through the safeguarding website, then we need to think about how we can better advertise it. So GP clinics, through health visitors, and we are going to look at whether or not reminding social workers, letting it go out to social workers as well so that they can advertise it. But we've got 3 sessions booked. The way that it will work is we've got a short presentation. For me, we're there with my partners from police and health, who are the members of the designated safeguarding board. And we have written a number of case studies from that we've taken from real cases. And we have got a Menti system where you can log on with your phone. We've also got hard copies for people that don't come without a phone, where we will review or outline a case that is presented to our front door, and we'll ask everybody to be able to vote. What would you do if this was presented to you? What do you think is the right intervention? Should we do early help with this case that's been presented? Should we do child protection? Should we do? Obviously, I'll do a context at the beginning around what does the Children Act say, a little bit like the public question that I've given, really, a little bit more information around that. And then we'll have a discussion with those groups around, okay, well, you think we should do this, let's look at what we did do. And that will, for me, will either bridge that gap between are we doing the same as what our community thinks we should do, and this idea that we're doing something different is older practice that is not taking place now, or is just not reflective of what's happening now, or is it that actually our community say, no, that for us that's early help, you shouldn't have been involved in that, and then we can have that conversation around, okay, what does early help look like then? Because as professionals, all we need to do is be assured that if we don't get involved and do a children in need assessment or a targeted early help assessment, all we need to be assured is that the families have got access to early help through universal services in your communities, that you're providing early help as the public for your community. So what does that look like? If we don't get involved, what will it look like? And I think that those will be really valuable conversations for us to do. So the session that we had tomorrow booked isn't going to take place, as I say, there's not enough people on. We do need to have people that are booked on. It's a lot of staff and officer time, and we can't just have an open invitation, turn up on the day, because we've got room sizes and all of the boring things like health and safety that we need to have registered. But we clearly need to do something more about advertising. The next one is booked for, I think, middle of October. So we've got some time to make sure that we advertise that. And they're booked up until end of December at the moment. There's 6 sessions. And if we need to, we'll come back and do the one for yesterday, because we're doing them in all of the 5 market towns.
Okay, I would really like to make a recommendation around this, because I think this is really important, that Herefordshire families understand what these thresholds are. And I think that September is a very difficult month. Obviously, everybody's coming back from the summer. If you've got children, you're just trying to sort of get through September, get your routines going. Is it possible that we can actually make a recommendation that some more intense publicity, I mean, you've spoken about it, but if we can undertake better publicity to promote these sessions and promote an understanding of what's involved, possibly through social media, to try and get people to come to these events, because I think otherwise you
can make that recommendation, but
yeah.
I've just said that that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, okay. Well, I would like that recommendation, because I think we need people to participate in that. We need a better publicity around it. The other question I had, seeing as though nobody else has their hand up, is in terms of health outcomes. Now, I can't actually see where it is on the improvement plan, but I know that it is there in the improvement plan, that making sure that every child has access to good health facilities, mental health, and one of those is dentistry. Is there a specific issue around dentistry in Herefordshire? I mean, we
I
know
don't-
there is, but
Well, I don't know there is, so it's interesting that you know there is, and I say that as in that's valuable information for me. Very early days, I'm picking up that our looked after children in care haven't got sufficient up-to-date dental checks. What I don't know is that a process challenge in terms of they've had those dental checks, but the system's not been updated? Is it a capacity in health challenge that actually children want to be registered with the dentist, but there isn't enough dentists in Herefordshire? And so for me, it's not just about looked after children, which is the KPI that we record. So I can see that that's low, but actually I want to understand, is that a challenge for Herefordshire that we haven't got enough dentists? I know nationally there is an overarching challenge. There's a lack of dentists around, but I want to know a little bit more detail around, is that a specific problem for Herefordshire? And if it is, where do we need to take that in terms of the ICB for making sure that, how do we make sure we've got more dentistry and prioritise children, particularly vulnerable children, to get dentists?
Councillor Powell, did you want to come in on that?
If I could, please, thanks. And the director's right, you know, we do need to understand this more, but just reflecting a conversation yesterday at the Health and Wellbeing Board, excuse me, it was reported that there have 2 new NHS dentists have been commissioned, so there's a positive. And a further positive from the Chief Executive from the Integrated Care Board, because I was interested to know, is that the end of the journey or is that the start of it, of course. So he explained that commissioning of dentistry has recently migrated to the Integrated Care Board from NHS England. And he explained his intent to that the 2 new dentists were the start of the journey, and you know, they've got some particular ideas about how they want to extend the service, including how mobile dentistry may become available for the more rural areas. So the director's right, we do need to understand it more. To be fair to the Chief Executive from the Integrated Care Board, he gave a quick summary, but did describe to me, I think, what will, if we dig into it, be quite a considered process of moving forward.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had reported to us from public health or, you know, on the joint strategic needs assessment that the county has really terrible, you know, results, you know, stats for children's dental health across the board. But I think as far as our looked after children are concerned, you know, as corporate parents, you know, we would all be wanting to make sure that our children went to dental appointments. And for me, you know, if that isn't happening for dental appointments, it begs the question, what else isn't it happening for that, you know, we would consider to be routine kind of health, well-being sort of checks for our children? So bigger question for me on that stat, you know, is that a bellwether that actually says there's other things, you know, that are not, you know, either we're not recording or aren't happening, and what would be the checklist of things that we would be expecting our children, our looked after children, to have in terms of, you know, sort of health and, you know, sort of general physical and mental health care.
They're the 2 things that we record and collate as the statutory indicators the dental checks for children in care and the health assessments, which include an emotional health and wellbeing and assessment. So health assessments should be done annually, dental checks annually, and so our KPIs on those, as you know, as I reported, are low on both. And so for me, it's just doing a little bit of understanding around, is that because there isn't enough health capacity to meet the need, or is it because there is a process issue for carers not presenting children for health assessments or dental appointments that are made? Is there an issue there? Or is it that actually the children have been they're registered with the dentist, they've been for the check, but actually it's just not been updated on the system? And that's what I'm trying to unpick now.
So if I could ask, if once that's been unpicked, is it possible then that we can we could hear back, maybe informally, if necessary, sort of what the issue is, and if it is an issue with capacity through the ICB, that a letter is written to the chairman of the Integrated Care Board, sort of asking what the situation is, and if that is, if need be, that is escalated to the Minister for Health and the MPs for the county as a priority area for our children. Because if that's,
I suppose I would say that I'm not sure about picking bits to informally feedback and the process for that. Actually, I think Councillor Powell's just explained that it was at the Health and Wellbeing Board. Whether or not Scrutiny want to have it as part of their programme to have a item on dental capacity and outcomes for children in Herefordshire, that's something that you could put on your programme, and have the ICB and public health data up to date, presenting that information, and the dental checks for looked after children will be part of that report. But primarily it will be the ICB that will come, and if you wanted to add that to your work programme.
okay, thank you. The statutory scrutiny officer, did you want to say something on that? I think it is actually on our certainly the send is on our work programme, but yeah, come in.
Yeah, I'll confirm that, but I believe this is something that the Healthcare and Wellbeing Committee have asked to look at as well. So I'll double check that, and we can have that discussion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Proctor, then Councillor Davis.
I just wanted to jump in on this just to say, so definitely, I think the committee, this is an area that I think we're all hearing a lot about, so the committee will want to look at it. I think what it would be useful to understand is the degree to which there's a system problem for the committee to look at, and the degree to which there's a specific issue for us as corporate parents, and do we need to be more pushy corporate parents? And so I think that will, just understanding that will help the committee to shape its work programme.
Yeah, I mean, Councillor Powell's confirmed that it is on the corporate parenting agenda. Obviously, it's on the Health and Wellbeing Board agenda. So it's how you link into both of those that are doing their respective roles in it, and what Scrutiny then want to look at in terms of additional, because corporate parenting is specific, isn't it, to children in care and care leavers. The ICB is responsible for all of the children in Herefordshire and the general health, and I'm particularly concerned, obviously, for those children, those vulnerable children, and those children with additional needs. So there's a range of people clearly looking at the issue.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yes, thank you. There was a time when they used to have travelling dentists and nurses, and that was invaluable to rural areas. That's not that long ago. Sorry, not that long ago really. But it was invaluable because parents didn't want to take children out of school, and the fact that along comes the ambulance, with the facility there. So you got one dentist, one nurse that would go around all the areas. Is that something that we could possibly look at?
Well, I think maybe this is something that we could refer back to the Health and Wellbeing Committee as well. Let's raise it. I think it would be good to ask, find out when that item is coming onto the agenda and ask a councillor a question about that. Would be helpful.
Councillor Powell's already said that travelling dentists is something that's in the process of being considered.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Okay, well, you can also ask, you can find out more about that. I wanted to quickly ask something about the commitment to child-friendly Herefordshire, and at the last meeting, when I asked what would child-friendly Herefordshire look like, you said, well, that's very much up to you. And, you know, not up to me personally, up to us as councillors and how we formulate policy. And this is definitely something that is coming. One of the recommendations that I would like to make about child-friendly Herefordshire is that if this is going to form part of the backdrop to Herefordshire, that we look at our when we have reports and we look at our impact on the community. There's a sort of impact assessment in the report. If we request that Cabinet actually adopt a standard format to every decision that's made in Herefordshire, what is the impact of that decision on children and young people in Herefordshire as part of the formulation to child-friendly Herefordshire? Councillor Proctor.
I would just like to understand what the status of child-friendly Herefordshire is. So it's not, for example, words used in the council plan. I'm not against it. Like, it seems like a good idea. I'm sure members would be in favour of it, but I don't quite understand where it sits in terms of corporate priorities, and is there a plan to bring it to council to have it adopted? So just some understanding of, from the executive's point of view, what is it? Where is it? What level is it supposed to shape council policies?
So there are a number of areas that have adopted child-friendly status, not the least of which are Leeds, our improvement practice partner, but as the director said, also Coventry, and we're arranging a visit to Warwickshire to have a conversation about what would that look like, what would it feel like, what would be the impact on policy and procedure. We obviously have a range of improvement activities that we're delivering, and child friendly seeks to support that rather than it be, you know, yet another series of things that we are going to have to do as well as.
Maybe I'm just being dense. I'm not sure I fully. Is it? Do you envisage it is something the council would commit itself to, and then what is the process for the council committing itself to that?
So obviously I've had conversations with a number of colleagues, and we've had a presentation and discussion at the Children and Young People's Partnership Board some time ago, and we've also had a discussion led by John Maynard from Leeds about the kinds of things that they did. So there is support for the concept of it. There is support to explore it and do it. But what we don't want to do is create a burden of activity that is going to detract from all of the important work that we're doing. So it will sit alongside rather than being extra work.
I still feel that there is capacity within decision making across the council to actually consider the impact of decisions on children and young people, and I don't feel that is adequately covered at the moment. Councillor Harvey.
Well, our work programme actually shows that we've got an item coming to the next committee meeting, which is looking at how the council accommodates and encourages input from young people on policy decisions in other areas of the council's operation. So we are, as a committee, already committed to taking a look at that more broadly than, you know, into the Children's Services Directorate, which I think is a good start.
Yeah, okay. So potentially that any recommendations could come from the next committee meeting on that item. Do any other members? Yes, Councillor Harvey.
Yes, I do. And I'm really pleased that we've got this as an agenda item alongside quality assurance coming together to this meeting, because they fit really well. It almost looks like we planned it. I think actually we did. But it's great to see the update of the improvement plan, not least because the addition of the information in terms of the QA data showing how areas are demonstrating improvement from 2022 through 2023 and, you know, on into the QA activity this year, not only demonstrates that the monthly snapshots that QA provides across our service areas build up into a timeline view that allows us to see the overall trend. And I think that's really important and informative, because lots of snapshots don't necessarily easily add up to that longitudinal picture that tells a story across the whole service area, but also within particular areas. So I think it's really great that we've got this update, that it's melded now with some information about from QA about what the journey is looking like across the areas, and highlighting where performance is slow to improve or has reduced over the period in some instances. So I wonder, would you be able to explain to us why some of these reductions in performance have occurred? Because, you know, there could be quite subtle, interesting and, you know, informative reasons why some of those dips have happened. For example, the reduction in the number of strategy meetings taking place within 48 hours in the MASH, which was 96%, and it's dropped to 92%, and why, with a smaller caseload in 2023, we've completed a lower percentage of care proceedings within 26 weeks than was achieved in 2022. As a couple of examples of things dipping rather than showing an upward trajectory.
I can't give you an in-depth response to those specific questions. As I sit here, I will either have that information in detail at this point in time, or I won't. You know, some of those things I can answer in terms of the detail that I've already got about the service. Others, I won't know in terms of that background detail to it. You know, every one of these indicators, you could ask the question in terms of where is it at now, why was it where it was at, and I would have to look at individually as they are. For me, it is about picking up where we are now. Where I can, I will reflect on where those indicators have gone, and I will explain going forward what I can tell you about the population, about the way of working, about what it is we're doing. I don't want, you can ask me, but I would hope that you don't ask me to go back and look at every indicator to tell you why each one of these have changed, because the work that would take for me, that analysis hasn't been there before. So I can't go back and look at anything. I need to understand now. Good example, you know, finding out which are the children that are coming into care, that are moving into residential? Who are they? Where are they coming from? I'm gathering this information now, but it doesn't already exist for me. So for me to be able to answer all of that, every one of those indicators takes a more of an in-depth review for me on the cases behind those numbers and behind those percentages. I'm doing some activity, for example, on repeat child protection. Why have we this year in Q1 had such a rise in the number of children that have come back on for a repeat child protection having stepped down? I've got an audit activity that's taking place to give me that information. I've got some work in place around the residential, as I said. I know that, you know, we've made less applications for care proceedings in this quarter than we did previously. I need to look at how many of those children have gone into pre-proceedings, how many link that to the child protection. There's no one simple indicator in children's services that you can just say, well, that's lower because. And in the public answer question that I did, you know, why are we doing more section 47s, or what the percentage is, what the number is, what the regional, what the national picture looks like. Each one of those will have a story behind it, and I need to get to know the detail of the service to be able to answer that. I think actually in the time that we've got, I've got quite a good understanding on a lot of it, but I'm not there yet in terms of being able to answer individual questions about where we've made the changes over that particular time frame last year.
Okay, well, I mean, I understand that you're not long in post, and you know you've been able to give us, you know, an awful lot of good information, context, and really strong answers to other questions. I think the principle of there being some significant performance dips showing as a trend across the QA information when you look at it against the improvement plan, having some assurance as a committee that somebody is looking at that and understanding what the broader story is about why some of these things are dropping.
And I think there's a difference between the QA, quality audit measures that are changing, and the understanding of the KPIs. You know, they're two different things. We need to match them and look at what and understand both of them to understand the overarching quality of the service that we're giving. But as I say, you know, why referrals into inadequate authorities absolutely go up. Every local authority that's been judged as inadequate, they go up. Ours went up. The professional anxiety in managing risk when there's not assured by the service goes up, and that usually results in an increased number of children in care and an increased child protection. You then move through that and getting people on board, getting people trained, and we can see that we've had a reduction in care proceedings and a reduction in child protection. That may well be a good indicator at this stage around that restorative practice and the impact that's having. But at this stage, for me, looking at actually, well, we've now got a number of repeat child protection coming back. Now that's 22 children in Q1, so it's not hundreds of children. So we need to understand the percentages against the numbers as well. But actually, it's still much greater, those numbers of children coming back on child protection. So before we celebrate our reduction in child protection, we need to make sure that we're not going, it's not coming up this end because actually we've stepped a number of children down. And why have those children come back? Is it because we had professional over-optimism when we stepped them down from child protection? That's a hypothesis. Or is it that they absolutely successfully made those changes in families and they've stepped out of the social care service and have been reliant upon early help services within their community and within you know, universal services, but they have not been able to provide the level of support that those families needed, which has meant that their risks and issues have escalated again back to the level. That's the kind of level of detail I need to understand to explain and be assured about what action we need to take about the numbers of children that have come back into the system, as an example of what I'm trying to make sure I've got a good understanding of.
Okay, well, would it be possible to provide a written answer to those two questions about...
Tell me again which were the two questions?
There was reduction in the number of strategy meetings taking place within 48 hours in the MASH from 96% to 92%, and why with a smaller caseload in 2023, we've completed a lower percentage of care proceedings within 26 weeks than were achieved in 2022.
Well, what I can tell you is that I'll give you a written answer.
That's great. Great. The other thing is for me on page 69 of the agenda pack and 15 of the plan. Towards the bottom of the page, one of the actions that we've got saying that we'll take, and it's something that I think is mentioned in the councillor briefing that's happening at the moment, is that we're going to monitor use of the new multi-agency professional differences escalation process for effective and timely outcomes for children. That's something that's being performed by the Safeguarding Partnership. But in terms of the timescale for that, it's saying 2024-25 annual reporting. And I don't know whether that means that it's going to be something that is looked at monthly and we'll report on it annually. But reporting on it once a year doesn't seem to square with monitoring the use of the new process if you only get kind of one look at it. So is it many looks and one report, or is it just looking at it once?
The process is now in place, so it will be used if there's an escalation of a case. There was one in March. We will, through the Safeguarding Board, continually monitor whether or not that process is being used and make sure that there is a timely outcome for the escalations. The issue of the timely outcome is that, you know, if we disagree as partners about the threshold of intervention, we need to make sure that we have that, we follow that process, have that escalation meeting in a timely way. It's not 3 weeks later that we meet to decide whether the child should be in child protection or be in care. It is within days so that we can have that debate, have a decision and then move the child through. That's the timeliness of it. The annual reporting of it is that we will report in the annual safeguarding report how many times that escalation process has been needed to be used in order to resolve a difference between the professional bodies. What's important is that whilst it's good to have that process and it's important that it's there if we need to use it, you wouldn't expect to have hundreds of cases of using it because that just indicates that you can't at a lower level discuss and have those professional differences. So it's good that we've got it, it's good that we use it. I know that we've used it once since I've been here and we used it very quickly. The meeting was held the following week. We had the discussion, we agreed the plan. That plan is up to date for the child. I mean, I touched base to check where that plan is at, you know, just the other day. So it's about the process being there. The annual reporting is how many times have we used it? Were we able to reach, you know, well, we would be able to reach a decision because that's what that process does. That's why it's an annual reporting.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. And finally, for me and for, you know, sort of public clarity, this plan, how is progress against it being reported on? Some of the timescales that are in here have already passed, so presumably things are starting to get ticked off on there. What's the mechanism by which progress on delivery of this is monitored and made public?
So it's monitored through the Improvement Board. Each of the recommendations and the actions in them report every 6 weeks to the Improvement Board, and we will identify risks under each of those where that particular activity shouldn't, is being delayed or there's an issue with it. So you're right, some of the auditing activity was raised at the last Improvement Board as a risk because the timescale had slipped, but Improvement Board just challenged to make sure that those timescales had been put in. They might have moved and, these things happen, but actually are they in train and is the programme in place there? So that's how it's reported in terms of the Improvement Board.
Okay, but the Improvement Board's not public, so how does the progress in delivery on this get made public, if you like, for public confidence?
I'm not sure how we've agreed that the Improvement Board will report publicly. The Commissioner will write a further report as we go through the timeline process. I think the next Commissioner's report is due in October, November time. Obviously, the other public reporting on the improvement overall progress is through our Ofsted monitoring visits.
Sorry, Councillor Harvey, did you want to finish that? And then...
Well, I mean, only in that this plan has been made public through being published as part of the papers for this as a meeting. Progress on delivering it, which is good news, and we should want to, sort of promulgate and celebrate. It seems like a natural next step. Perhaps the cabinet member could take that away and consider how that's going to happen.
And perhaps also we can just look at our work programme. When we do the work programming session on the 27th, we can actually just look at how we build an update of the improvement plan into that. Councillor Proctor, I'm very conscious that we've got 3 minutes left of this meeting. Do you want to make your point, and then we'll have to wrap everything up?
Well, it is just a thing that there's very little in the improvement plan about technology, data, digital. Is that because we're just focusing on doing what we need to do and we'll come back to that, or is there another plan somewhere else which looks at investment in digital data and technology?
There is a wider council plan around the development of digital and technology as part of a whole council which children's services are involved in. I think it's appropriate that doesn't sit in this. This has been about a refocus to get down to actual children's social care and the multi-agency partnership practice. But there is a wider council, and there will be other partnership plans around the development of digital.
Thank you. Right. We really are out of time. I hope nobody had any other pressing issues. Thank you very much. Thank you for the plan. It looks much better. Thank you for the reports and for the information on auditing and quality assurance. Councillor Powell, you have a final word if there's anything you'd just like to add.
I'll just summarise by saying I'm very happy to take away Councillor Harvey's point about how we, what the appropriate way in which we publicly report progress with a view to not only improving confidence but also recognise some of the challenges that we still have. So thank you. Thank
you. And I think what we could do is include that as a recommendation, which we haven't actually, just the recommendation being that we find a mechanism to report back publicly on the improvement plan. Can you manage that?
What has the council identified means to report publicly on progress in delivering
the improvement plan? Okay, so we have two recommendations here. Let's just check that we've got them right, and if we're missing anything. Well, actually, we have the list of recommendations. We have the recommendations from the previous discussion as well. Okay, so if you don't mind, yeah.
Okay, I'll just start with the two from this meeting first, if that's okay. The two recommendations tabled by the Chair are as follows. 1. Publicity campaign for feedback. Cabinet should endorse a publicity campaign to ensure maximum feedback from children, young people and families on the working together consultation concerning right time, right place thresholds and managing risk. And secondly, that Herefordshire Council identify a means to report publicly on progress in delivering the improvement plan for children's services.
Okay, is everybody happy with those recommendations? Have I missed anything? Okay, thank you. And then the previous recommendations.
I'll read these out again for completion. 1. Adopt unique children's service values. Children's services values. Children's services should adopt their own set of values and principles, separate from the corporate council values. These should be displayed on a child and family-friendly page on the Herefordshire Council website, alongside a user-friendly guide to the Quality Assurance Framework, ensuring the framework and values are publicly accessible and reinforcing the strengths-based, restorative approach to cultural change. 2. Children and young person involvement in audits. The service should explore ways to involve children and young people in the analysis associated with the auditing process, ensuring their experiences and feedback contribute to service improvement. And 3, that the service explores quality circles as a means of getting staff feedback.
Thank you. I think that where it says quality assessment framework, it should be quality assurance framework. But apart from that, is everybody happy to... Yes? Is that a block vote on that? Thank you. Okay, so those recommendations are made. Can you change that to quality assurance framework? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Just to acknowledge that Councillor David Davis did actually join us online. Apologies for not bringing you in, Councillor Davis, at all. Hopefully, if you'd wanted to say something, you would have raised your hand. Also, just to address the issue of the public questions, I think to err on the side of caution that we will request a written response to the supplementary questions that were submitted, a written response to the actual questionnaire rather than making them public, because there were some concerns over some of the confidentiality being breached through that. And the item on the work programme, we are actually meeting on the 27th of September to look at the work programme and the...
You do actually have to agree your work programme in a committee meeting, however. So I table the work programme in front of you. If you're happy, just a simple raise of the hands and we can all go home.
The only thing that I would like to add to the work programme is when we look at the voice of Herefordshire children, that we actually include Rural Media Company, and there have been some discussions. So if everybody's happy, they've done a lot of work on this, and it would be good to bring them into the discussions around that. So if everyone's happy, if we can...
Is that the next meeting? Or?
It is the meeting in November, which looks at the voice of children. That's on the work programme.
Yeah, but I thought it was how the council accommodates and encourages children to participate in other aspects of the council's decision making. And it was looking specifically at transport, according, for example, transport, according to the work programme that's on the agenda. If we're looking more broadly at the voice of the child, I absolutely agree that rural media has done some fantastic work recently with young people across Herefordshire, and it would be a good thing to hear more about it. But I'm not sure that it aligns with what we've got in the programme, and we need to be clear to officers in terms of what it is we're actually wanting to cover in that meeting, because it's not the only agenda item.
Okay. So the agenda, what we've got on the work programme is including children's voices in council policy. So understanding the role of the council's children advocacy team, scrutinising the council's participation and engagement strategy, scrutinising how the council seeks to understand the priorities of children and young people with regard to council areas of responsibility, and there was an area of focus around transport. Yeah. So we've got Hereford City Youth Council coming as an attendee on that. I think sort of what I'm requesting is that we include, as an attendee, we include rural media, because they have done work on.
Well, I'd be happy to support that if they're able to attend in the time frame.
Yeah. Okay, I'll confirm that. Does everybody support that? Okay, thank you very much. I think that brings us to the conclusion of this meeting, unless there's anything that, no, we're all done. So the next meeting is Tuesday, the 26th of November at 2 p.m. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. And can I please check with Democratic Services team that the live stream has been